Hi, my name is Hillary Herndon. I'm the viola professor at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, United States. And I am here today to share a presentation with you that I call Dr. Seuss and the Art of Interpretation. So first, I would like to thank Professor Morawski for inviting me to participate in this fifth International Viola Forum. I wish I could be there in person and be there and meet you all face to face and enjoy your beautiful town. Unfortunately, we have to make the best we can, make do with the best we can in these situations. So I am really happy to be here. So I thought I would first share with you where this came about, this presentation. So this came from me trying to find ways to work with students. I am sure for the teachers in the audience, you have had this experience, and for students yourself, you might recognize this, some truth in it of yourself, of having a difficult time translating the things from the page into something musical. I find this particularly challenging with the type A personality students, those who are very used to being the best at everything they do, and they search for being correct all the time, and they might get stuck on the building blocks of the music, looking at playing the right notes at the right time, with the right articulation and right dynamics. And those are all very, very important. I'm not trying to say that they aren't, but that is just scratching the surface of what we can do musically. So those students can get frustrated and feel like that they need instructions, that they don't understand how to come up with something that is an interpretation because it wasn't provided for them as an answer. So I like to use language as a way to get this across. The idea being we understand nuance in the way we talk very easily. So take, for example, a student says, "I like your shirt," versus "I like your shirt," or "I like your shirt," right? Three very different meanings from the tone of voice. So how we say something, the nuance that we use, and how we put stress, where we organize our words, those things can convey a lot of different emotions there. So this is how we can start to do this. So I am using Dr. Seuss here because I think that it is a nice way for us to interact and to make it fun. We have children's books. I think we can all imagine speaking to a kid or a classroom of children and trying to make something engaging. So we might be a little bit more over the top with it and be a little bit silly. And I think that that's good. Although this can work with any type of nonfiction, it works really well, but I think Dr. Seuss is a kind of a fun way to start with it. So what we are going to do is we're going to look at three different Dr. Seuss excerpts from his books, and we will talk about the various elements that are there in that piece, and then we are going to relate it to a piece of music. Now, I am not trying to suggest that these pieces are correspond to a certain Dr. Seuss character, more that the elements of interpretation that we use in speaking these could be similar to what we can explore in music making and how we form our interpretations. And finally, I also want to add before we get started that the one beautiful thing about music is that there are many valid interpretations of something. There's not one right answer, and that's what makes it beautiful and what makes it wonderful and exciting to go hear concerts of a piece, the same piece for the 10th, 12th time, because different people will have different interpretations on it. So this is just a way to get us started thinking about that, and we move forward. Okay, so here we go. This is our first reading. It's called "If I Ran the Circus." So normally what I would ask you to do would be to read through this and think through how you would say it, and I would ask for a volunteer. Since this is not a live performance presentation, I will be reading it myself, but I would like you to read through it. I'm going to give you a moment to read through it yourself and imagine how you might present this in a dramatic reading. The Circus McGurkus, the world's greatest show on the face of the earth or wherever you go. The Circus McGurkus, the cream of the cream. The Circus McGurkus, the circus supreme. The Circus McGurkus, colossal, stupendous, astounding, fantastic, terrific, tremendous. I'll bring in my acrobats, jugglers, and clowns from 1,033 faraway towns to the place that you'll see him in, ladies and gents, right behind Sneelock's door in the Great McGurk Tents. So with this reading, the first thought is when looking through what's the character? How do we know? So there's lots of exclamation points here. So it's getting this idea across that it's very exultant and it's got an ecstatic character. What tone of voice might that imply? Would you use a gentle tone of voice, something like this, kind of, or would you be more upbeat? Would we be big? Would be more bragging, more bravado? So my take on it when I look at this is that you are calling the attention of everybody. You are the heralder of this circus, so that it's going to be more full than a conversational tone and have lots of joyfulness to it, confidence. How will the enunciation help that character? So I think being very articulate in it. The Circus McGurkus, the circus supreme, instead of Circus McGurkus, the world's greatest show, right? Having more enunciation on these words really helps gets that across. So one way you could try this, if you were using to exaggerate differences, to say with an everyday style of reading. So the Circus McGurkus, the world's greatest show on the face of the earth or wherever you go, compared with the Circus McGurkus, the world's greatest show on the face of the earth or wherever you go. Very different levels of engagement, but it also brings a different energy level and a different character to mind. There's also the issue of pacing in here. So particularly where I would like to point out is in this long list of adjectives here in the second paragraph, third line, where we have colossal, stupendous, astounding, fantastic, terrific, tremendous, right? If we read them that way, they're all the same, then nothing becomes important. And the key here is that it doesn't really matter which one you pick out, but we have to organize them some way as something is most important. So one interpretation could be what I did before, but another one that could equally work would be the Circus McGurkus, colossal, stupendous, astounding, fantastic, terrific, tremendous. Right? You could organize it and pace it towards a different one and have different levels of dynamic showcasing which one is most important. Again, not a right or wrong answer, but both of those that we tried there are much better than colossal, stupendous, astounding, fantastic, terrific, tremendous. That just starts to feel like a run-on sentence. So that will help your listener make sense of it. So now let's consider some similar elements of interpretation in music. Now, because this is a group of violists, I provided all viola excerpts, so I hope you will appreciate them. So here is an excerpt of the Andante and Rondo Ungherese from Weber. So a favorite character piece of ours, I thought that would make sense to work with in this context. Again, I'm not trying to suggest that this is related to If I Ran the Circus at all. But so first question is, what is the character and how do you know? So when students look at this, we can look through and pick out some elements that might inspire us to think things. The first one I see is that Ungherese there, Allegretto Ungherese. And this is a key time to point out, you should know all the words on the page, especially if it's in a different language than you speak. So go look it up, the Hungarian there. And so what does Hungarian mean to you? What is the Hungarian style? Understanding these will help make sense of how you would want to interpret it, what the composer was trying to lead you to understand. A next thing I have here, we have in the piano, these offbeat accents, bum, 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 bum. That gives it a very different feel than if the piano was just going bum, 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 bum. Definitely giving it this kind of like the gypsy feeling there that we've got. Also, we've got all these grace notes and xylophone, that type of thing. Da, 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 da. Those dotted rhythms, that artificial harmonic down there on the second line, all of these things give it some clues about the character here, how we might read this. So another thing that we can consider here would be articulation. We had talked about how we would enunciate certain words in the previous, so we had circus, McGurkus, and being very strong with those articulation and diction, or we could be more gentle with it, the circus, McGurkus, having more crispness to the words. I think that would be something that we need to consider here as well. So would you hear this with more gentle articulation, more smooth and elongated? So Viola, would you hear it more, or more separate? Right? Which fits the character that you hear in your head? Because that articulation really makes a difference. Pacing. So how we organize it. If we think back of that line of words that we had colossal, astounding, tremendous, terrific. If we had them all equally paced, colossal, astounding, tremendous, terrific, it starts feeling a little bit like ho-hum, right? So I think similarly in our runs here, little things. So do we want all of those eighth notes to be exactly even? Or do we want to have more stress on some and that gets grouped a little bit differently? So more. Right? Again, you can go too far with this. You. And your pianist will kill you. So I'm not suggesting that. But if we have slight organization towards certain notes, that can really help give it a different character, which is all what we're trying to portray here. So we have talked about the articulation, the pacing, how we're going to organize those rhythmic elements, the cues that we see in the score that can help provide inspiration and sort of what character we want. Okay, our next reading is going to help us examine elements of tone color and dynamics. Wheel it back down. So if you could look at Horton Hears a Who and think to yourself a moment here. How would you read this? What characters? So here we go. Through the high jungle treetops, the news quickly spread. He talks to a dust speck. He's out of his head. Just look at him walk with that speck on that flower. And Horton walked, worrying, almost an hour. Should I put this speck down? Horton thought with alarm. If I do, these small persons may come to great harm. I can't put it down, and I won't. After all, a person's a person, no matter how small. Then Horton stopped walking. The Spec Voice was talking. The voice was so faint that he could just barely hear it. Speak up, please, said Horton. He put his ear near it. My friend, came the voice. You are a very fine friend. You've helped us, folks on this dust speck, no end. You've saved our houses, our ceilings and floors. You've saved all our churches and grocery stores. So, the elements that I want to talk about here. So, the Spec Voice. This is particularly why I picked this one. What is the Spec Voice? And how do we hear the difference? How do we portray that? So I showed the dynamics there, and I brought quieter. This is a great way to discuss projecting and volume. The idea of a stage whisper. I am not an actor, so I realized I did not have the best stage actor voice there, but when listening to it, you could tell I was trying to do something, a different voice. And you can see that, I think, in Dr. Seuss's text, because he had that small print down there for that line. So how would you show that? How would your student, if you had someone reading this, how would they bring that out? Another thing with that is that making sure it can still be heard. So I am projecting this right now in front of a microphone that is 6 inches from my face. If you are doing this in a classroom where you have 12 people in the room listening, you want to make sure that that small voice is still being heard, that they can understand what you're saying, that they can hear ceilings and floors, that it's being clearly enunciated, that they can understand those words. Another thing that I think we can put here is particularly down in the Spec Voices little paragraph there, is what the important words are. So you've helped all us folks on this dust speck no end. You've saved all our houses, our ceilings, and floors. So which one is going to be most important? And the churches and grocery stores. Again, kind of like what we had talked about in the previous reading, you have to pick something to have an organization to what you feel is most important. So you've saved all our houses, our ceilings and floors. You saved our churches and grocery stores, right? The grocery store was really important. Having some variation in there can help organize where we want to, what our main important point is. Okay, so the next, we're going to look at a piece, the Walton Concerto. And the reason I picked this is because this is a concerto, obviously, with orchestra. And it starts at this mezzo piano. And then later on at 1, we are accompagnando, but it's piano. And then we have a pianissimo. So this relates to that spec voice. Yes, we want to have a drop in dynamic. We want to show those changes in character and changes in voicing, changes in role, but we need to make sure that it is still being heard in the hall. So this is the difference between a concerto versus playing in the orchestra, a pianissimo, right? Like what tone of sound are you going to have? I see too often students come in, they see that mezzo piano and immediately, right, that it gets contained, that we need to find a sound that's going to be heard, but still project that character that you want, something that's that's smaller, calmer, not as big, but that is still being projected. So, right, that we have this reaching out. It's not, but finding that sound that can relate the different experience of that mezzo piano, similarly as in our Horton Hears a Who. So this can also bring up questions of, can you project? Would we be hearing that over the orchestra? Articulation plays a role, like we had talked about before. So would we want, in this instance, if our character, do we want pointed like we did in the Weber, or do we want something more gentle? Or do we want more nuance on one of the notes? How we organize those is very similar to how we choose to organize the language of what we speak in our text. So hopefully that will help bring that across. Other things you can discuss in something like this would be vibrato. How is the vibrato helping bring apart that character? What are the phrases? Which notes are most important in here? So if you had, let's see, let me get down to, which note do we want to be most important? We don't want, right? They're not all equally important. Organizing how we're going there. Another question would be, is the character developing? Does it stay the same? Is that voice getting agitated, or is it calming down? Is it exactly in its same place overall? We see all these dynamic markings in here. That would be a great indication that things are changing, and to consider how that's changing. Okay, so for the next reading, we are going to look at, this is going to be The Cat in the Hat. So this is a great one to look at. It covers more character changes and more voices, which we started talking about just a moment ago. So, I know some new tricks, said the Cat in the Hat. A lot of good tricks. I will show them to you. Your mother will not mind at all if I do. Then Sally and I did not know what to say. Our mother was out of the house for the day. But our fish said, no, no, make that cat go away. Tell that cat in the hat you do not want to play. He should not be here. He should not be about. He should not be here when your mother is out. Now, have no fear, said the cat. My tricks are not bad, said the cat in the hat. Why, we can have fun, lots of good fun, if you wish, with a game that I call Up, Up, Up with a Fish. Put me down, said the fish. This is no fun at all. Put me down, said the fish. I do not wish to fall. So, some questions here. How many characters are there? So I see that we have our narrator, we have our fish, and we have the cat in the hat. And how would you change your voice to reflect this if you were going to be presenting this to as a dramatic reading? Do you try and have different tones of voice? Different pacings, different energy levels? Does the articulation change? I'm hopeful. My intent was to show that the fish is much more adamant and angry, and he's the voice of reason here, and the cat is kind of beguiling the kids and wanting to get them in trouble. And he's like, oh, no, your mom doesn't mind at all, right? So having those different tones of voice and levels of import can bring that about. So pacing, punctuation, bringing out these up, all these words that are in all capital letters, similar to what we might see in music when there's an accent or sforzando. Those are things that we can bring about in different ways. So you do not want to play. We could be angrier, we could be louder, or we could stress it. You do not want to play, right? We could change the length of it slightly. There's a number of things that you can do when you speak. And I encourage you, this is what's hard when we have just me on the computer, but if we had a room full of people, everyone could read it and we could have different interpretations that work really well. And it's fun to see those and then incorporate that into the musical examples. So if we now look at some Bach. Bach is wonderful for bringing out these different voices, to find different voicings. And I think that's something that we often lose because it starts to seem like just a run-on sentence of words. We just keep going. And I encourage you to find those voicings in here. So do we have right there, new voice, right, bringing out these different voices and how that's going to change the color of sound that you're trying to get. Also, it has a little bit of separation, right? We can't go. There's a little bit of like a comma that we put in the sound. We allow it to stop and move on to the next thing. It's not a period because we're not at the end of the phrase, but that helps bring those voices out. So punctuation, beat hierarchy. That's something that we don't have a direct relationship with text, but we do have our literal punctuation. So where are we going? Where is most important? In Bach, we have our beat one here. So in other words, we wouldn't want, they're not equally important, right? There's stress release. That those are elements of this interpretation. Understanding what those are and bringing that out helps provide that character and energy. How can we show direction? Where are we going with something? That's an element of phrasing. In our text, we use, again, where we head to a word, I am going to here, and then I pull away. Similar, we can do that with dynamics and with rhythm slightly. Articulation, all these things help bring these elements out here. So some general thoughts. So ways to work on this and incorporate it. So my suggestions are to use this by asking yourself to read aloud and asking yourself some specific questions of a passage. So find a book that you find has a definite character to bring about. Ask yourself, what's the general mood? What's the character? Does that stay the same in the passage, or does it develop? And does it develop seamlessly? Or is it like black and white? Are there these drastic contrasts between things? Is there any dialogue? And if so, how are you going to change the tone of voice? Is your articulation helping your character? Are you projecting your character to the back of the hall? What's the most important idea in the passage? And are you phrasing to help make this clear? What is the rhythmic pacing of the passage? Notice how the author or composer's punctuation might influence your ideas. I know that there are many others. This is just scratching the surface. It's getting you thinking about it to consider how this works. Some ideas for you as well would be, what I have noticed is that the student who tends to be shy in their playing, that tends to play everything as if it's a piano or delicate, tends to read their voices this way when you give them a piece of literature to read. So it's a great way to address some of the similar issues that they have in their repertoire and phrasing. You can talk about it with the language when you give them an example. You can help work with them on projecting, on bringing exaggerated characters. It might feel like it's over the top to them and they're being like really silly. Again, this is why I think the children's books are a wonderful way to start, because it releases some of it. It's inherently silly to begin with, and helps break the ice, especially if you yourself do it. If we all do this, if you are a student watching this, I would suggest you do this in your own practice room, to read it and record it and listen back. And can you imagine a child staying engaged in that? Trying to develop that level of conviction in what you are saying, and then incorporating that same level of conviction into what you are playing with those similar characters we just talked about. So bringing about the character, how's it a tone of voice? How's your articulation, your pacing, your elements of stress, organization, what's most important, hierarchy, all of those things coordinate together to make your musical interpretation hold together and communicate what you have in mind with your audience. Final thought for you is that when a student starts to really get this and they are able to present a really nice interpretive phrase to you, challenge them to come up with a different interpretive phrase that works. Maybe 2 or 3 different ideas to do something in a different way. It's like trying on different hats. Like, oh, I like this one. No, not so much this one. Or this one's nice. And you can take elements of things you like and try to combine it into something new. Having that ability and language to address what of the phrasing we like and what we don't, and also just the creative ability to think of something and then the technical ability to make it come to life is a part of this. The more creative we can get and the more we can create what our imaginations can come up with, that just gives us all the more tools and ability to make music interesting and in your own voice, not that of your teacher. So I would love to ask questions, or answer questions at this point. I do have a handout that I will share with Professor Moravsky for those of you who would like to look at some of this later. And feel free to email me, because I'm not here live to answer any questions. That is my email address. You are welcome to write me and I will write back. So thank you for watching, and I hope this was interesting and gave you some new ideas. And I will look forward to seeing you in the masterclass. Thank you.